Good day, fifth grade. I hope you are well. Welcome to chapter 11, lesson 1 on measurement. Now, a couple things before we start this chapter. We will be using both the fifth grade and the fourth grade My Math books for chapter 11 because I know that you did not get to this topic as much as you should have due to term 4's situation where we all had to stay home forever. So I'm going to cover not only the fifth grade material, but the fourth grade material too. So don't feel bad about that, because my goal is that I will send you off to sixth grade with all of those holes plugged so that you won't have to worry, oh gosh, did I miss something? No, because we're gonna cover all of that. So by the time you get into sixth grade, you will be great. So let's get started. A couple things about measurement before we begin. First of all, I want to talk about the types of measurement. Otherwise, what do we measure? Okay, so here are some of the things that we typically measure. The first one is distance. Now, when I say distance, I don't always just mean like the distance between Johnstown and Utica. That's a long distance, but it could be small distances like the length of your book. That's a measure of distance, okay? Weight. Now, weight is the gravitational pull of the earth upon an object. You'll talk about weight a lot in science. Capacity is usually a measure of liquid, how much liquid a container will hold, which is also called volume. And of course, we measure time in seconds, minutes, etc., etc., etc. So these are some of the things that we measure. Now, when we measure, there are two, I left my other board back here. I'll be right back. There are two systems of measurement that we are going to talk about. The first one we're going to talk about is called American customary. This is a very old style of measurement. It used to be used all throughout the whole world. At this point, though, only America and one other country that starts with a L, which is a country I'd never heard of before, so I can't remember it. I have to look it up every year, and this year I just didn't bother. So anyway, there's two countries in the world that still use the American customary system. The rest of the world uses the metric system. Both systems measure those things that I talked about. So as we go through all of our lessons, we're going to fill in the units for American customary that measure these things. And then we're going to go ahead and fill in the units of the metric system that measure these things. Now, in fifth grade, the standard is that you are able to convert units within a system. So we will never be converting between the American customary and the metric system, but you will in other grades, just not this year. This year, our goal is to get you comfortable with American customary and then comfortable with the metric system and converting within those two systems. So we're starting our lessons with the American customary system, and we are starting with the measure of distance. Now, most of you know already that we measure distance in things like inches, feet, yards. These units were established long ago, even before I was born, if you can imagine. They were based on body parts, because back then, before we had any standard units of measure, it was very difficult for people. They would go and they would try and barter with each other and say, well, I have this much grain and I need eggs, or whatever they were doing, and there was no standard to measure the amount of grain. So they started using parts of their body. So an inch is the measure of one adult finger segment. That's about an inch. A foot, just like it says, is a measure of an adult man's foot. A yard is approximately from one shoulder. If you extend your arm all the way out like that, it's from one shoulder to the end of your fingers. That's approximately a yard, okay? Now you can, I bet right away you can see what the problems are, okay? Right away. We don't all have the same size feet. We don't all have the same wingspan, as I like to call it. We don't all have the same size fingers. I mean, it's close, it gives you an idea, but it's not particularly precise. So for that reason, they started chopping up units of measure because we needed to be able to measure things a lot more precisely with a lot more detail. So I have, and this is part of your note, I have a blown up section of a 1 inch measure. Now it's big, see? That's not an inch, is it? No, you know that. But you can see how they've fractionalized it. That's a great word. I think I just made that up. Ooh. So they have fractionalized, and so you can see this is a 1/2 inch to quarters, even into eighths, and in some rulers, they've divided up into 1/16 of an inch, just so they can be more precise. Yeah. So the one thing, we're gonna talk about measuring with a ruler in lesson 1. The rulers are made of all kinds of different materials. At school, I have this really old wood ruler that is from like before I was a kid. That's what I used to use. And basically, that old ruler was divided into 1/2 inches and maybe 1/4 inches, and that was it. And it was, of course, made of wood. Now, there was a problem with wood. After years, the edges of the ruler get worn away, and what happens is then you can't get a precise measure. So the manufacturers of rulers did 2 things. First of all, some of them changed the materials from wood to either plastic or metal, and that cut down, especially for metal, that cut down on the wear and tear of the edges. And what they also did, and you can see in this ruler, it's a plastic one, it's clear, so I'm gonna use a piece of paper so you can see it. You can see that it starts, there's the edge of the ruler right there, but the measurement starts a little bit inside. So there's my 0 mark. So when I'm measuring, I do not measure from the edge of the ruler, I measure from the 0 mark. And that is very, very important. That is a mistake that many 5th graders make, is they start measuring from the edge of the ruler. Now, unfortunately, every ruler is a little bit different. So before you start measuring with a ruler or a tape measure or whatever you're going to use, take a second to look at it. Where do I start? Oh, okay, I start there. It just takes a second to avoid that problem when you're measuring. So with your assignment today, you will need a ruler or a tape measure, whatever you got is fine to use, but just look at it first. You'll find on tape measures that, and I have one here, what they've done is at the very edge where it starts, look what they've done. They've put a metal piece, and that is to avoid tearing the edge so you can get a good measure. So on this particular tape measure, I can begin measuring from the edge because there is no 0 mark and there is metal to protect the edge. So you gotta look at your tools before you start your measuring. So on page 803 and 804, it is a 2-page assignment. You will be measuring a couple of pictures on that page, and you will be measuring to the nearest 1/2 inch and measuring to the nearest 1/4 of an inch. Now, sometimes that measure will be the same, sometimes it will be different. Then it will ask you to measure some objects around your house. Whatever you got is fine. Then it asks you to draw a line segment with each of the following lengths. Now, to do that, what you do is on your paper, looking at your ruler, place a little tick mark at the 0 point, and then place a little tick mark. Let's say I wanted to draw a 3-inch line. So I would place a little tick mark here and a little tick mark here, and then I would draw my line segment. And that's the best way to do that. I just want to remind you that on page 804, you have word problems. Word problems are answered with a sentence. Please don't forget that. If you have any questions about measuring, please shoot me an email or bring your question to class and we will deal with it there. Until then, bye now.